What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 3 best builds in Destiny 2. So for every single build I will give you a quick overview, then also we will take a closer look at the best abilities, useful aspects, what fragments and gear should you wear. Also we will go into depth about the most broken weapons, OP artifact perks, then what stat priority should you have, then even what is the best skill rotation and how in general your gameplay will look like, and much more. This setup is built around the Cenotaph mask and is by far the best exotic item for an S tier support build. As a support, your gameplay loop will be much more passive, since our objective will be to target large enemies and provide to yourself and your teammates trace rifles and heavy rifle ammo. The general idea is that when you or your allies defeat enemies, then they will steadily receive automatic ammo regeneration. So overall, if you're looking for the new meta support build, which is amazing for group play and has an amazing survivability, then this is the one for you. So let's take a look at our setup. For our super, we're using the Well of Radiance. This solar super has been the meta for pretty much all warlock supports, as all players can become nearly invulnerable within the circle of the well, while also getting radiant and restoration effects. Just don't forget that if you're using this for a damage phase with the teammates nearby, then don't move around within the well, as at that point you're likely to damage your teammates. Next we have our abilities, and for the first one we have the Phoenix Dive. This is a great option for those warlocks looking to not just stand in a circle, but instead continue to glide around the battlefield. Next we have the Shave Glide. Your jump ability is up to you, but for me personally, I found that the Shave Jump works the best. Next we have the Incinerator Snap. This is just a simple melee that has a close but wide attack range. Also, the scorch applied by this can affect multiple targets at once. And then finally we have the Fusion Grenade. This is a phenomenal option if you combine it with the Touch of Flame. Pretty much your grenade will explode twice, so this is a great option for the champs. Next up we have the aspects. For the first one we are going with the Touch of the Flame. Because of this, now your grenades have enhanced abilities, aka you get fusion, so your fusion grenades will explode twice in a row. And then for the second one we have the Heat Rises. This is just a great option to consistently keep up your healing and melee energy. You need to consume your grenade to cure yourself and the teammates. Also, this ability to shoot, use melee and throw out grenades while gliding is very fun, which also helps you to build up your melee energy even quicker. Just don't forget to use the Heat Rises first before the Phoenix Dive, so you can activate restoration faster. Next we have the fragments. My first choice is the Ember of the Torches. This will power melee attacks against enemies, which makes you and nearby allies radiant. This is perfect for consistent activation of more weapon damage and intrinsic barrier stuns. Next we have the Ember of the Empyrean. So now solar weapons or ability Final Blows will extend the duration of the restoration and radiant effects apply to you. You should just keep in mind to consistently have both of these buffs up and active if you plan to use the Solar Trace Rifle. Then also we are using the Ember of the Searing. By defeating scorched targets, this will grant us melee energy and create a fire sprite. With the Indescendant on your Trace Rifle, we will be consistently scorching the enemy targets. And finally, for the last one we have the Ember of the Seeing. Your class ability recharges faster when you scorch targets, so you want to use the Phoenix Dive back instantly after scorching targets with your Trace Rifle. Next up we have our required gear, and for this build we need to use the Cenotaph mask. This is a very versatile option among all the other subclass elements, and is a very powerful S tier support exotic. When an ally defeats the marked target, special ammo is generated for you and heavy armor for your allies. So because of this, your teammates won't ever have to run out of ammo. And you can get this item from purchasing it from the Zor, and his loot will rotate weekly. Also, you can go to decrypting exotic engrams at the Rahul. This will be a random exotic drop, but will prioritize exotics you currently do not have, which is known as the knockout system. And more guides about that you can check on my channel. You can also farm the expert loss sector on the helmet armor days. And finally, this is also available as a job from the Vex Strike Force. Next up we have our armor mods, and for the helmet we want to use the special ammo finder, heavy ammo finder and hands-on. Then for gloves, get the heavy-handed, impact induction and focusing strike. Then for chest, here you can get any resistance mod of your choice, but personally for me I went with the solar resistance, arc resistance and void resistance. Then for legs, I went with the arc weapon Surge, Innervation, and Recuperation. And finally, for class item, I chose to go with the powerful Attraction, Reaper, and the Bomber. In short, armor mods are unlocked by progressing through your Guardian rank, and you can check out my mods guide in this video's description. Then as far as weapons go, my recommendation for the kinetic weapon is the Midnight Cup. I love to use this for the light variant because of its original trait that reduces our cooldown on our grenade. Then for energy weapon, we are using the Divinity, the ultimate support trace rifle. This one is great for adding extra damage to enemies for your teammates and enabling you to stun overload champs instantly. And then finally, for the power weapon, we have the Wendigo GL3 Adept. This is the perfect grenade launcher to use for this season, as he has great perks and amazingly high damage. Next we have stats, and our main stat priority is resilience, then discipline, then recovery, and then everything else. Resilience is the amount of damage you can take before dying, as well as your shield capacity, so that's why we want to focus on it as much as possible. Next we have discipline, which reduces our grenade cooldown. And finally we have recovery, which is how long it takes for your health to regenerate after you take damage. Then for one of the last things we have the artifact perks. This setup does not benefit very well from a lot of artifacts, because it is focused more on stasis. So for the first one we have the kinetic impacts. This is great since you can boost our heavy grenade launcher power. Second we have the killing breeze. This will give our final blows a special mobility bonus, which is very useful as it will count trades as more than just one. Next we have the field revenant. This will deal increased weapon damage to the Scorn. Next we have the total carnage. This will give us damage resistance when we finish off our enemies. And finally we have the debilitating wave. If we finish an enemy, then he will emit a damaging stasis wave. I recommend to work towards unlocking the boost for this artifact perk, as this will also give us a slow effect with the wave itself. And now finally we have come to the gameplay. And as this is a support oriented build, so this is very simple. So for our Solar Warlock, the gameplay loop is much more passive, since this is a support build. Targeting larger enemies is the job of this build, since getting heavy bricks for your team is the play. Also, champions are the main focus, since their individual abilities can devastate a team. Larger bosses will just need few taps from a trace rifle to mark them for damage, so feel free to use it on general mobs, since the final blows will drop a special ammo brick. Also, using the Well of Radiance during a damage phase in tight situations is the key for survivability. And a quick tip for keeping up with your healing is to consume your grenade to activate the heat rises. With this you can Phoenix dive to add restoration to yourself and keep it going with the Ember of the Empyrean. You'll definitely have consistent heals from taking targets down with your Solar Trace rifle. Overall, the Xenopath Mask Sword Warlock is the ultimate support build, thanks to its versatility in multiple activities. Access to ammo, healing, and damage is something that every Day 1 raid team will need, and this build brings exactly that. Likely, you won't have the most kills or top damage with this setup, however, you will definitely be the best support in the game, and that's about it. This setup will utilize the exotic class item Solipsium, with the perfect combination of Spirit of the Ospimancy and Spirit of Verity. This combo excels at generating huge amount of vortex grenade energy and improving your AoE damage massively. On top of this, when we also pair this up with the aspect of Defy the Void and Buried Bloodline weapon, then every single one of our abilities and multi-kills will proc the Devour trait. This will result in quick regen of our vortex grenades that have even more increased damage thanks to the Spirit of Verity. So overall, this is a top tier ability spam build, which thrives in endgame content where the enemies have huge amount of health. So let's take a look at our setup. For our super, we are using the Nova Bomb Cataclysm. This is an extremely strong burst damage option that also synergizes with the Facet of Purpose Fragment that gives you an overshield trait. Next we have our abilities, and for the first one we are using the Healing Rift. This skill will heal you and your teammates while standing inside the radius. Next we have the Burst Glide, and your jump ability is up to you, but for me personally, I found that the Burst Glide works the best. Next we have Arcane Needle. This melee ability gives you 3 charges, and we want to use it to activate the Devour and apply the Unravel to the enemy targets. And then finally we have the Vortex Grenade. This grenade pulls enemies and does bunch of damage to an enemy caught inside. This pairs extremely well with the Spirit of the Ospimancy, especially on large targets that can withstand the entire duration of the vortex grenade. For our build, we have to use this ability, as it's extremely useful for our particular playstyle. Next we have the aspects. For the first one we are using the Feed the Void. When we get a kill with any of our abilities, it will activate the Devour. This aspect increases the amount of health and grenade energy received on kill when Devour is active. So in short, this will drastically increase our uptime of our vortex grenades. Then for the second one we have the Bleak Watcher. This is another pretty much must-have thing, as almost all prismatic warlocks uses it, because it allows us to convert our grenades into stasis turrets that can also lock down an entire room. However, it will take some time to get perfect execution, to have all of your 8 turrets going on at the same time. Next we have the fragments. My first choice is the Facet of Protection. This will provide us with damage reduction when we are surrounded by a bunch of enemies. Overall, this will greatly increase our survivability. Next we have the Facet of Courage. This grants us a 10% damage buff for light abilities to enemies affected by the darkness debuffs. We need to use the Arcane Needle skill to activate this damage buff. Then also we are using the Facet of Bravery. So when we defeat a target with a grenade, it will grant us a volatile rounds to void weapons. In short, this is a free DPS increase to our Buried Bloodline and the Edge Transit weapons. Then for one of the last ones we have the Facet of Purpose. By collecting an Orb of Power, it will grant us an Overshield for even more extra survivability. And finally, for the last one we have the Facet of Dawn. This will grant us a Radiant when hitting an enemy with a powered melee, which also increases our weapon damage by 25%. Then next up we have our required gear. And for this build we need to use the Solipsium with the Spirit of the Ospimancy and the Spirit of Verity. These specific perks will give the build its OP grenade uptime and damage. For mods we want to go with the Time Dilation, Powerful Attraction and the Bomber. And you can get this class item from the Dual Destiny exotic missions. Also by opening any chest within the Pale Heart, and finally by doing cooperative focus missions. Next up we have the armor mods, and for the helmet we want to use the Harmonic Siphon, Special Ammo Finder and the Heavy Ammo Finder. Then for gloves get the Firepower, Momentum Transfer and the Impact Induction. Then for chest, here you can get any resistance mod of your choice, but personally for me I went with the Solar Resistance, Arc Resistance and Consecutive Dampener. And then finally for the legs, I chose to go with the 2 Void Weapon Surges and 1 Void Scavenger. In short, armor mods are unlocked by progressing through your Guardian rank, and you can check out my mods guide and how to get them in this video's description. Then as far as weapons go, my recommendation for the kinetic weapon is the Mountaintop, and for perks we want to go with the auto-loading holster and either Recombination or the Warple weapon. Then for energy weapon we are using the Buried Bloodline. This weapon is the key to always having the Devourer active, while also applying the Weaken to the enemies. And then finally for the power weapon we have the Edge Transit. This weapon with the Envious Assassin and a bait and switch is a top tier DPS option in the whole game. Next we have stats, and our main stat priority is Resilience, then Recovery, then Discipline and then everything else. Resilience is the most crucial stat to focus on, so we want to aim for 100 resilience to maximize our damage resistance and shield capacity, which will ensure better survivability in challenging encounters. Second, we have the recovery, as it reduces the cooldown on the Warlock's class ability and decreases the time it takes to regenerate your health and shields. And then lastly we have the discipline, because it increases the cooldown on your grenade ability, which allows it to charge faster, thus increasing our DPS even more. Then for one of the last things we have the artifact perks. So first off we have the Overload Breach Loader Grenade Launcher. This allows the Mountaintop to stun overload champions. Also, your special grenade launcher is always overcharged when that modifier is active. Second, we have the Feel the Revenant. This deals increased weapon damage to the Scorn. Next, we have Rapid Impact. This will deal damage with a grenade launcher and temporarily increase the reload speed as well. Next, we have the Killing Breeze. This will give us a bonus mobility to help you meet the stat recommendations. Next, we have the Total Carnage. When we finish enemies, this will give us damage resistance. Then for one of the last ones, we have the Debilitating Wave. When we finish an enemy, it will emit a damaging wave. We also want to unlock the boost for this perk to apply the Weaken trait. And finally we have the Conductive Cosmetic Crystal. So now your void abilities do bonus damage to the targets that are affected by the stasis debuff. This includes stasis weapon perks such as the Cold Steel and the Chill Clip, or also debuffs from other players in your party. And now finally we have come to the gameplay. So we want to start our DPS rotation by getting kills with the Buried Bloodline to stack the Spirit of Verity. Then after several kills or by defeating a target with an ability, Devour will be granted. So this will provide us incredible survivability and rapid regen of the Vortex Grenades. So then afterwards we want to focus our Vortex Grenades on enemies with more health, specifically Majors and Bosses. This lets the Spirit of Ospimancy grant you its full benefit by allowing your grenade to do damage for the entire duration. Overall, you want to throw your grenades at the boss, then defeat smaller enemies with weapons to guarantee that there is another Vortex Grenade ready to be thrown when the previous one runs out. And then finally, to achieve maximum damage output for our Vortex Grenades, while the Devour is active, we want to shoot at the enemy with the Buried Bloodline to weaken them, then hit them with an Arcane Needle to inflict a Darkness debuff for the Facet of Courage, while also granting Radiant with the Facet of Dawn, and that's about it. This setup will harness the chilling power of the stasis to destroy the enemies by slowing, freezing and shattering even the biggest crowds of adds for incredible crowd control. The main key of this build is the Ospimancy gloves that will grant us additional Cold Snap Grenade and reduce its cooldown on direct impact. So pretty much we will be able to use these OP grenades 24/7. Although the stasis build requires specific gear and mods to really shine, however, once completed it will offer unparalleled control and you will destroy any enemy that crosses your path. So let's take a look at our setup. For our super, we're using the Winter's Wrath. This super ability will conjure a stasis staff and fire a barrage of shards that freeze enemies on impact. And overall it is amazing for ad control but not for boss damage. Next we have our abilities, and for the first one we have the Healing Rift. This skill will heal you and your teammates while standing inside the radius. However, when you are at full HP, this will be converted to a shield. So you want to use this frequently to generate the grenade energy with our bomber mods. Next we have the Burst Glide. Your jump ability is up to you, but for me personally I found that the Burst Glide works the best. Next we have Penumbral Blast. This ability will send out a short-range projectile that applies freeze to the targets. You will want to use your melee frequently to generate grenade energy with the Impact Induction mod. And finally we have the Cold Snap Grenade. This is the only grenade ability that interacts with our Ospimancy gloves, and as our build is structured around it, so the skill is a must-have. This ability can either way be thrown as a grenade or can be also charged up to create a Bleak Watcher turret, which I will explain in just a second. Next up we have the aspects. For the first one we are going with the Glacial Harvest. When we freeze targets it will create a stasis shards. Collecting these shards will grant us melee energy, that in return generates grenade energy with the Impact Induction. We can collect stasis shards and gain up to 5 Frost Armor stacks, which provides us with 22.5% damage resistance at max stacks. And then for the second one we have the Bleak Watcher. This will charge your Cold Snap Grenade to convert it into a stasis turret, which then will fire projectiles that apply slow on impact. If enough of these projectiles land, then the target is frozen as well. If you are good enough, then these turrets can lock down an entire room. However, it will take some time to get perfect execution to have all of the 8 turrets going on at the same time. Next we have Fragments. My first choice is the Whisper of the Fissures. This one will make that all of our frozen targets and stasis crystals deal increased shatter damage. Next we have the Whisper of the Shards. This will create a stasis crystal with a headstone. If we shatter a stasis crystal, it will grant us 500% additional base grenade regeneration rate. Also, additional time can be added to this buff for every crystal shattered, which will cap at 11 seconds. Then also we are using the Whisper of the Torment. This will give us a grenade ability energy every time you take damage from the enemy targets. The amount is increased when you have Frost Armor, which is easy to earn on this build by picking up the stasis shards that I mentioned just a second ago. And finally, for the last one we have the Whisper of the Conduction. This will make that the nearby stasis shards will track to your location, so it's much easier to utilize them. Then next up we have our required gear, and for this build we need to use the Ospimancy gloves. This will provide us with additional Cold Snap Grenade charge, and direct impact from your grenades will also increase the grenade ability regeneration, and on top of this, The Seekers spawned from the Cold Snap will travel further and faster. However, you will need the Witch Queen DLC to unlock this exotic armor piece, and if you have it, then you can find this by either way completing the Witch Queen campaign on the legendary difficulty. Then also you can farm the Expert Lost sector on the Arms Armor days, and they also can be found by completing the Vex Strike Force public event. Next up we have the armor mods, and for the helmet we want to use the Harmonic Siphon, Heavy Ammo Finder and the Special Ammo Finder. Then for gloves get Grenade Kickstar, Impact Induction and the Momentum Transfer. Then for chest get the Charged Up, Consecutive Dampener and Void Reserves. Additionally, on your chest you can replace the Consecutive Dampener with the appropriate resistance for the specific activity that you are trying to do. Then for legs go with the Innervation, Stacks on Stacks and Recuperation. And finally for our class item get the Distribution, Bomber and Reaper. In short, armor mods are unlocked by progressing through your Guardian rank, and you can check out my mods guide in this video's description. Then as far as weapons go, we want to prioritize weapons with the Demolitionist trait. Glaives, shotguns, sniper rifles and fusion rifles will give us 20% grenade ability regeneration on kill, while on every other weapon we will get only 10%. So my recommendation for the kinetic weapon is the Bolt Endings. This is one of the few weapons that can roll or be crafted with the Demolitionist and the Headstone, both which generate grenade energy. You will need to shatter a stasis crystal from the Headstone to activate the Whisper of the Shards, and to get this weapon you need access to the Final Shape DLC. Then for energy weapon we are using the forthcoming Deviants. In addition to the Demolitionist, this glaive rolls or can be crafted with the Stabilizing Rounds, which synergize perfectly with our stasis turrets. Also, our kills will apply the volatile trait to the surrounding enemies, and further damage will result in a big explosion. So to get this weapon you need access to the Final Shape DLC, and you can farm it from the Salvation's Edge raid. And then finally for the power weapon, we have the Leviathan's Breath. This is a very heavy exotic bow, which is great against bosses and also stunts unstoppable champions. You'll need the access to the Shadow Key pack to unlock this bow. Next we have stats, and our main stat priority is Resilience, then Discipline, then Recovery, and then everything else. Resilience is the most crucial stat to focus on, so that's why we want to aim for 100 Resilience to maximize our damage resistance and shield capacity, which will ensure better survivability in super hard fights. Next we have Discipline, and this will decrease the cooldown on your grenade ability, which allows it to charge faster, thus increasing our damage even further. And finally we have the Recovery, because it impacts the cooldown on the Warlock's class ability, and decreases the time it takes to regenerate your health and shields. Then for one of the last things we have the Artifact perks. So first off we have the one with the Frost. While Frost armor is active, our stasis weapons will gain increased reload speed and stability. Second, we have the Feel the Revenant. This will deal increased weapon damage to the Scorn. Next we have Total Carnage. This will give us a damage resistance when we finish off our enemies. Next we have the Debilitating Wave. If we finish an enemy, then he will emit a damaging stasis wave. I recommend to work towards unlocking the boost for this artifact perk, as this will also give us a slow effect with the wave itself. Then for one of the last ones we have the Brain Freeze. So this will make it that our frozen enemies become surrounded by Chilling Fog, which will slow all targets that aren't already. And then finally we have Served Cold. When we pick up a stasis shard, it will give us a class ability Energy. And now finally we have come to the gameplay. So we want to start our DPS rotation by charging our Cold Snap Grenade to throw out a Bleak Watcher turret that shoots projectiles at enemies and inflicts slow. If a target is hit by enough of these projectiles, then they will get frozen. Next, when they are heavily damaged, after a while all frozen enemies will shatter, which will deal additional damage all around them. Also, by us using the Whisper of the Fissures, this will increase the size and damage of this blast even further. So then when that happens, we want to use our Healing Rift to stand our ground and reduce the grenade cooldown with our Bomber mod. On top of this will also activate our Reaper mod. Next, we want to get at least a double kill by using the Bolt Endings, which will drop Orbs of Power. This will give your armor charge stacks before you throw out your next grenade, which then will trigger a grenade kickstart, so always be on the lookout for the orbs to pick up. Next, we also want to use the Cold Snap grenades in between our stasis turrets We want to throw these grenades into groups of enemies to instantly freeze and chain to one another. And on top of this, the direct damage will recharge grenades quicker, thanks to our Osmimancy gloves. Then afterwards we want to defeat enemies with the Demolitionist weapons to generate even more grenade energy. Precision kills with the headstone will spawn the stasis crystals, and shattering these will increase the grenade energy regeneration from the Whisper of the Shards, which will enable us to continue throwing out Bleak Watchers and the Cold Snap grenade. Then also we want to shoot forthcoming deviants into a group of enemies. Final blows with the destabilizing rounds will make the rest of our group volatile, and further damage from the Bleak Watcher turrets will cause the volatile target to explode. And finally, while your turrets are beaming the enemy, try to apply the freeze with its primary attack, and shatter all surrounding frozen targets with a secondary attack, and that's about it. So if you enjoyed this video, click like, subscribe and comment. If you are interested in more content, then check out my channel and I will see you in the next one. So take it easy, peace.